What's up, guys? Chris Brown, otherwise known as Chain Stasis Wellness, coming at you with another wellness moment, this time part 2 to the 5 weeks of wellness. So if you're still working on part 1, first week of what I talked about last week, that's okay. Don't feel like you're rushed and don't feel like you can't learn anything from these videos. My intent here is to kind of help guide you through these 5 weeks in hopes that this will be a kickstart to your wellness, not really like an end point at 5 weeks. Nobody should be done with their wellness. This is a lifelong journey. This is not something to be started and finished. It's not a challenge necessarily, though it may be challenging at times. So let's go back to week 1 before we talk about week 2. What did we want to accomplish or start to accomplish in week 1? First, we wanted to set a goal. We wanted some SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time constrained, and you had to tell somebody who cared, right? Once you establish that goal or goals, you wanted to figure out how to track these goals, right? Figure out where to go from the beginning. So a lot of people have start with nutrition. They start with doing a food log. If you don't have proper nutrition, a lot of other things in your health are probably not going so well. So it's always a good part to start at. I told people to start with at least 3 days of the week. Try to get 1 day on the weekend. Some people, they jump right into 7 days. That might help you. That's fine. I told you didn't have to start off with tracking the quantity or portions. Make it as simple as you need it to be. Then I said, if you can, pair it with an emotional trigger log. If you're the kind of person who has emotional eating issues or just tends to be eating when you're emotional, this is probably a great idea for you. And after a few weeks, you can start to notice trends and try to figure out and strategize how to work around those issues. A good example of this might be every Sunday during a football game, you start to eat chips. You sit down in front of the TV and do that. Or every time you go out with Joe or John or Sally, whoever, you always get a margarita and chips and guac, right? So those are the kind of things that people do when they're happy or maybe when they're sad, right? We talked about the halt, don't go shopping or do most things that are important when you're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. The next thing you do is you calculate your Tdee, total daily energy expenditure. Mine was about 3,400 calories for maintenance. So typically what you say is if your maintenance calories are this and you're looking to lose, you subtract 500 calories from that number. Now I usually tell people let's work a little lower, maybe start at 200 and go from there. So it's not such a big shock to your system. But often you'll find people aren't even eating that many calories consistently. They're just kind of going all over the place and they're not regular. So if it feels like too much for you to handle, it probably is. So just try to start to eat better first before you worry about hitting exact calories in the first week or two. And then if relevant, you can measure your body fat, you can measure your weight, you can measure your circumferential waist and hip measurements. I weighed about 210 pounds. I'm not really too worried about losing weight. But I wanted to measure it anyways. I have about a 36-inch waist. Probably could get down to 34, 33. Not really. That's my last goal. Not really too worried about that. But it's something that I want to look at. And you can take pictures. Pictures tend to help people a lot because visually sometimes you can see things that the number on the scale won't show. I always tell people pictures and circumferentials will tell you if you're losing fat while you're gaining a little bit of muscle. Did you make a strength and weakness list? Did you identify what's worked in the past and what hasn't? Have you identified how you're motivated? I made a post earlier this week about what motivates me, my family, my peers, that kind of thing, and how that works. Do you know? That's really important. And at the end, I wanted everybody to figure out what is a small incremental change that's easy enough to do that I can start right now towards my goals. And I gave examples of drinking a glass of water in the morning, taking fish oil, anything like that. Just be better. Just take today and be better than yesterday. And that's really all you need to do as long as you're consistent, right? And you're working in the right direction. That's what I always tell people. You just need to be consistent and adhere to your plan. Even if your plan is easy, it's still a plan and moving forward. Okay? So week 2, what do we want to do? Well, if you missed any one of those things, it's not too late. There is no failure in this. There's just take a step back and then take another 2 steps forward, right? It's not too late ever. I cannot repeat this enough. 5 weeks is not an end. 5 weeks is a beginning, okay? So add in anything you missed from the previous week to this week and make it the new thing you're working on. Whatever you finished or keep doing and you're good at it, keep going. Add one or two more things, right? So if you forgot to do your strength and weakness list, do it. If you didn't do an emotional trigger log, and you probably should, do it. That kind of thing. So don't feel too bad about not getting something done. Not everyone can do that, right? So we're gonna take all that information we had from last week, and we're gonna maybe add a little more information this week, but we're gonna take the knowledge we have now to help progress us, okay? We're gonna make it a little more challenging, maybe a little more involved. So the food log, you wanna progress your food log, all right? If you're struggling with this food log or it kind of stresses you out a little bit, don't worry. This isn't something that's meant to be forever. Oftentimes people use a food log to help them get back on track or to help them organize their thoughts. I never recommend people do food logs forever. It's just too much work, and you shouldn't need to once you learn things. So we're just looking for patterns. Ideally, you want to try to get at least 3 weeks worth so we can fit it on that scatter plot. You need at least 3 points to get a line, right? Well, we want to do that with both the food log and the emotional eating if you're going to do that one. So maybe you progress this log to include portions. Maybe you didn't do that. Cups, grams, ounces. You can even use your hand for portion sizes. Palm, fist, or thumb. How much of those, right? Those are pretty good metrics. Maybe you add your emotional triggers if you feel like you need to. Maybe you add the time of day you eat your foods. Maybe you actually figure out calories or macronutrients, all right? And you can use something like MyFitnessPal to track your calories a lot easier. So if you want to start using an online app, great. That's awesome. Cool. I love that stuff. We'll be using this, the caloric intake eventually when you get it, to try to fit it a little bit more towards your Tdee, your total daily energy expenditure. So again, coming back to my example, I was at 3,400 calories. So maybe I want to move to 3,200. And maybe this week I want to try to hit about 3,200 calories, okay? Again, that's just a guideline. They're never perfectly accurate, okay? All right. So now we want to assess other things around us. Now that we kind of have a starting point, we got to look at what could go wrong, what do we need to get our plan to go right, and what do we have for tools available? Well, one of the big things for food is environment, right? What do you have in your kitchen, pantry, and fridge? So most people, they tend to have a pretty good idea of what are good foods versus bad foods. Bad foods are typically, they're all on a spectrum. Good and bad is it's not always the best way to label foods. But what are things that are against your goal or helpful to your goal, really? And your goal is hopefully being well, right? Healthy, maybe being lean, but maybe being bigger. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me as long as it's leading to your health, right? So what is good for your goal and what is bad for your goal and what is just kind of somewhere in between? Try to find those things. If they're highly processed, like white bread or candy or baking materials to make cupcakes, probably they're bad for your goals, either whether it's for health or physique. Performance even, right? If it's something that's natural, came out of the earth that way, like an animal product, fruits or vegetables or tubers or beans, things like that, it's probably good, right? And sometimes there's gray areas like whole wheat bread or rice or anything in between. Those are probably somewhere in between, right? So that's the first thing I find that people kind of need to sort through that and determine whether I have mostly bad foods or bad for my goal foods or good for my goal foods in their house. And a big thing here, the second one, can you visually see food in your kitchen, in your eating areas? Is it always making you think of it? Are those foods snacky foods like chips and crackers, or are they nice and healthy things like fruits and vegetables? Can you not see anything? That's probably ideal for a lot of people. Whenever you see things, you think about them more, right? That's how advertising works. So don't advertise to yourself that you have junk food in your house. Maybe you want to start putting that stuff away. Next, do you have cooking tools? Can you cook? That's huge. If you're not making any of your own food, unless you can afford a personal chef, you're probably not eating the best. You're probably going to restaurants, getting takeout, and they're making hyper palatable, hyper salient foods that are just so good. And you can't resist them, but also they're so full of extra processed stuff that makes them yummy. So you're probably eating way more calories than you know, and you're probably not eating as consistently because of it. So if you can't cook, you should probably look for some recipes, get on YouTube, look for some tutorials But also, if you don't have the cooking tools like crock pots, spatulas, a wok or skillet, slow cookers, things like that, rice makers that make your life easier, then you're going to have a hard time. Maybe you want to invest in things like cutlery, scissors to cut up your chicken or your meats. Maybe you want to get shaker bottles for protein shakes. I don't know. But if you have none of that stuff, it's going to make it extra hard. So maybe you want to invest in that. And then you want to get to, what are you willing to throw out? You found a lot of bad foods in your house, bad for your goals. What are you willing to get rid of? Don't lie to me and say, I'm going to get rid of all of it, and then you just like hide away cookies. That doesn't help anybody. You got to figure out, hey, why is this food in my house? Why am I holding on to these things? All right. And if your answer is, oh, I'm keeping it there for the kids. I hear this one all the time. You have to ask yourself, why are you feeding your kids something that's probably really bad for them and will be bad for them in the future if you won't give it to yourself, if you shouldn't give it to yourself, right? Does your logic for your rationale hold up, right? Are you afraid they're going to get mad at you? Are you afraid they're no longer going to love you if you get rid of their Oreos? Probably not, hopefully. So those kind of things are questions you need to ask yourself and be honest with yourself. And maybe you should share that with your emotional spotter, your significant other, your friends, your good friends, your doctors, your therapists, whoever, and they can help you kind of sort through the emotions behind it, because usually a logical rationale for keeping bad food, it has some deeper meaning there, and you might need to work through it. All right. And the biggest thing is, do not assess any of these things while you're while you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, while you're emotional. Emotionally driven decisions, they don't tend to be the best towards your goals. They tend to be like, what do I want right now? Okay, so try to be as logical as you can. All right. So if you did go through all that stuff, you got rid of the bad food, we may need to go shopping, because you don't want to have no food, because then you have to go out to eat, right? That's not a good thing. So you identify those foods before you throw it all out. Let's figure out where we want to go. Map out a menu plan of potential meals you can eat throughout your day and week. All right. Let's be realistic about that. Sit down with a piece of paper or on a computer and write it out. But are these foods that you can make, and are these foods that you actually will make? Are they appetizing? Will you actually eat them? Is this recipe super complicated and annoying, right? We want to make sure it's simple enough that you can make it without being a top chef. You don't have to make any raspberry reductions or anything crazy, right? But it also has to be palatable, and it has to be healthy enough, but not something that you think tastes like garbage, right? So that's the question you need to ask when writing out your menu with every meal. Maybe you want to sit down with your significant other and or kids while you do it. Hey, is this food you like? Do you hate this? Obviously, if your family members are super, super picky, you might have to do it a little more on your own. But it's good to share with other people and kind of get their feedback on it as well. That way, they also know that you're really working hard at this, and hopefully they'll be supportive of you. Based on that list, you then need to make a grocery list. All right. Even if you don't do the shopping, it's important for you to put it on the list for the person who does shop for you to know what you need. Maybe they might even help and say, oh, you forgot this. You need this for this soup, or you need this for this recipe, and that will help out. Maybe they have other great ideas for you. It's always good to ask people's advice as long as they're supportive and helpful. So when you write out that grocery list, make sure that list is followed. You go to that grocery store and they are always trying to get you to buy tons of things you don't need, right? Tons of things that probably aren't that great for you, but they're flashy and they're tasty and they smell and look great. So make sure you have a plan and you go and stick to it. If you didn't write, candy bars or cake mix, you should not be going through that aisle, because you don't need to be in that aisle. Follow mostly the outside perimeter, but sometimes you need to go on the inside to get other things, okay? And do not go shopping while hungry, angry, lonely, tired, right? Try not to be emotional. We want to be fairly logical about this stuff, okay? Until you get into a flow, it's going to be a little tough here and there, especially if you like to wander or chat with people while you're in the grocery store. Try to avoid being emotional or distracted while you're there. Just get the job done, all right? And finally, this is something you're going to do every single week. Add another small incremental change to try to help turn around bad habits or to add to your good habits, right? So maybe you want to start an exercise plan. Maybe you want to add to your exercise plan or actually start to write it out. Maybe you want to put your phone away, put your phone away during breakfast or dinner, and just be more present with your family or with your food in general. Just be more mindful. Maybe you want to find a person to help you, what I call an emotional spotter, or what I also call an account buddy. That just sounds fun. I don't know if that's a thing. To join you on your journey to wellness. All right, maybe you want to do a group of people. Sometimes that can help. People always know a Weight Watchers, that can be a good resource. And there's a lot of groups online, Facebook groups. You can probably find it on Instagram as well, and different social medias, right? And finally, you can take from your lists from week 1, and they can become things that you want to do for this week, incremental change. If you didn't finish one of your lists, or you didn't actually drink your water in the morning, or take your fish oil in the morning, or whatever, make it this week. It's fine. There is no end to this. Again, if you fail, you just got to learn from that failure to be a little bit better. Failing's fine. It's when you don't actually change what made you fail. That's the problem. Okay, don't allow failure to stick. Find out why you failed, maybe make it easier, and move forward. Okay, just remember, there is never a too late. Okay, you can always be better than you were yesterday. Even if sometimes you go back before going forward, there's never a too late, right? All right, guys, that's all I got for you this week. Don't worry about it. Try not to stress out. Just add a few things. Try to plan, sit down, give yourself your free time, and write things out. Okay? Make a plan. Try to stick to it. If it fails, figure out why. Make it easier. Move forward again. Okay? That's all I got for you this week. Again, you got this, and be well. Thank you, guys.